And if that happens, okay, fantastic. So, well, thank you very much once again for joining into this fantastic workshop. It's going to be a hands-on experience. And the workshop is about building your professional brand. And this is right on point because certainly if you don't have the possibility to meet people in person, everything is happening online. And whenever you present your identity or tell everybody about who you are and what kind of work you have to do in the world, you certainly want to have the best opportunities and the best presence ever. So in this case, we are very, very lucky to be able to bring two amazing professionals that are going to give us the latest and the best ways to do that. We have Matt Ray. He's a designer advocate and XD instructor for Adobe, and he's based in Waterloo, Canada. No, actually, no. Yeah, he's moving to
Close
Kingston.
enough.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, well, we're going to keep track of where you are. But at least on the side of what you have done, yeah, you have, well, Matt has almost a decade of experience in product design across travel, autonomous vehicles, EdTech, and advertising. And now he's focusing on bringing the best and the most amazing experiences in Adobe XD. And what can I say? You know, you have to be passionate about it. So he has a extremely passion about a user experience and developing a design community. So thank you for joining us, Matt. And also we have our amazing Maddie Bird, or Beard, Bird. Oh, my Spanish
Beard.
is getting
You got
across.
it.
Yes, Beard, sorry. And well, she's a strategic designer with a focus on UI, UX, UI, and well, she's really interested in the wellness space. And this year is an amazing Adobe Creative Resident, and she's exploring ways to connect to help people achieve their wellness goals using tech, while intentionally designing these products to promote more mindful tech use. Something that both topics are really, really important nowadays. And she loves sharing her process and learnings with the creative community in Instagrams and her YouTube channel. I will suggest to, after the event, please look for Matt's and Maddie's content on YouTube. It's really fantastic, and I just love the quality they have. Now I have to say that this is the moment I just keep myself quiet and hopefully everybody else, so we can open the stage for Matt and Maddie.
Thank you very much for having us. It's a privilege to be with this group and a fellow Canadian group. So that's amazing. It's a little bit warmer here than it is there, probably. So I'll rub that in. Let me just kick off with sharing my screen. The staple, let's start a virtual call. Okay, awesome. So good evening, Calgary. I'm a couple of hours ahead and the future's bright. We're going to kick off. Luis did a great job of introing both of us. I'll just recap. So I am a design advocate for XD. And so that means I do a lot of this. I do a lot of working with community groups, design teams, and writing a lot of content on how to make the most use out of XD and really teaching and educating people on that. I'm coming from a fairly diverse background in design, from autonomous vehicles, EdTech, all that was covered before. And so I'm bringing all that forward. And I just really love connecting with community groups like yourselves. And then Maddie, do you want to give a little extra spiel about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Denver, Colorado. So it's kind of funny being one of the only people not from Canada. That does not happen often in events that I join, but this is cool. So yeah, I started off as I guess I started off in graphic design. That's what I got my undergrad in. Then when I graduated, I got a entry-level UX job doing e-commerce apps. And after that, I decided I wanted to go freelance. And so I did that for a couple of years and then found out about this opportunity as an Adobe creative resident and applied. So I'm currently kind of finishing that up, doing some projects both in UI UX to add to my portfolio and also Like was mentioned, I am working a lot on YouTube and education and things like that too.
Awesome. Thank you. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about our own personal brand experiences. We're going to try and keep that short so that we can get into some hands-on. And there were some links shared out early on about downloading XD and downloading some assets that you can use while we're going through this. Now we're going to try and go slow so that if you are following along, you don't get lost. But as was mentioned, there is a recording. So if you need to loop back, just sit back and enjoy and kind of take in the workshop and then loop back to it and work through. Now, I did share both of our Twitter links. You can always feel free to reach out on Twitter if you have questions. I can share my email later as well. Maddie just shared the link for assets, so feel free to download that. And again, if you get stuck, don't worry about it. One thing I will note is what you see on screen today is going to be different than what's in the starter kit. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is we're using potentially copyright assets. We're using some assets we've pulled in that we can't share with you. And then the other piece is just that we've gone ahead and done some things to speed up the demo so that we're not sitting here all day pushing pixels. We can really help you tell the story. Time is limited, unfortunately. There was also a question. And so as we're going, feel free to drop questions in the chat. We're going to take time at the end and throughout to answer those questions. And there's already one about, I downloaded XD the other day and didn't know where to start. Anything, or do you recommend particular training? So there's tons out there. Again, I can share some more links towards the end. Maddie's got some great resources. I shared a link to the new Learn Hub on XD, where myself and Howard Pinsky have put a lot of content into. So you can definitely use that as well. And then there's a bunch of Adobe Live and Adobe Creative Challenge videos where you can look and learn, do more of these hands-on workshops. So lots out there, and look out for links in the chat. So with that, we'll get started. And I'm going to just share briefly kind of my perspective on personal branding. So I'm coming from a background that's not really design centric. I'm coming from a kinesiology background, spending a lot of time in human factors and ergonomics. So my design background was definitely not traditional. And over time, I taught myself, I kind of learned the ropes and then ended up where I am today. So for me, personal branding isn't necessarily just about where I've come from. It's kind of telling the story and shaping things for where I want it to go. So for me, it's really about finding what you want to do, discovering your strengths. This feels a little cliche, this slide, now that I'm looking at it, but it's true. It's not like I'm going off into the mountains, though I would love to do that and discover yourself. It's really about learning the hard way sometimes what your skills are, and then showcasing that and showing that to the world. So a lot of the times we think of a brand as a visual thing, and there's definitely a visual element to it. And when we look at a slide like this, we can look and we quickly recognize the brands behind these visual elements or marks. So for instance, in the top left, we're probably all familiar with Doritos. And if you didn't, then you're probably eating healthier than I am, which is good. But this latest campaign where they just show the colors of the bag and the shape of the logo, it symbolizes that it's not just the visual asset that makes a brand. There's a lot that goes in behind it. And then flipping to the other side, we have Johnny Ive. And when you see that picture, you're probably thinking Apple product video or a cool way to say aluminum. There's a particular brand associated to Johnny and his image, and it's not necessarily a mark. It's his own personal brand, right? And so as we look at all of these, it's not just the visual asset that makes this brand, it's the story and the associations behind it that really bring meaning to these marks. And so at the root of what we're talking about today, we're going to go through a workshop and create some visual assets. But at the core, you need to understand what that asset means to you and what you want that asset to mean to the world while you're creating it. So here's a quote. You can read it. I'm going to skip it, but it basically summarizes what I just covered. The brand mark really represents how somebody experiences a product, service, an experience, right? We're all muted. Perfect. So the visual elements of a brand are how we make that association. And for me, I learned a hard lesson that that brand will evolve. It might start somewhere and you might think, this is me, this is what I'm going to do, but it's going to change. You're going to learn new things and you're going to make mistakes, you're going to fail, and you're going to hone that brand and what that means. And so for me, I've had several different focuses. I thought I'm going to go and do photography. I'm going to be an ergonomics student. I had all these different channels and those kept changing as I learned. I had a manager tell me, you don't want to do this, you're going to be bored. And that just rocked my world and it started changing my brand. So don't be afraid to make changes and completely kind of toss something aside if it's not working. It will evolve. And you might start broad. So even on this early business card, I had 3 different things, all of which, or 2 of which I don't do and I never should have done. But I didn't know until I put myself out there and refined. And so I'm going to just spin through this quickly. This is kind of like a timeline. I worked on founding a company and I thought that was my identity. And then I worked in EdTech, kind of started building up my design. I wasn't really a designer yet at this point. And so this is where I started really refining that piece of my brand. And that ended up being the thing that started sticking. As I moved into autonomous vehicles, I was a product designer, and then that kept going. And now my brand is shifting again. I'm taking what I've learned, and now I'm really a teacher. I'm an advocate for designers. And so each year my brand has kind of evolved. And that's not something to be afraid of, especially when your brand starts like this early on with Web 2.0 bubbles crudely created in Keynote. It's going to happen. This is where my brand started. And now I'm working towards a more refined brand, simple, and adjusting the messaging to what I want to do next, what I am doing and what I'm focused on, and just forgetting about the other things. So I'm going to leave you with a few guiding principles. So don't be afraid to evolve. Keep your mission clear. Maybe early on, you're going to cast a wide net and say, I'm going to do a little bit of this, but make it your intent to figure out what you want to focus on and really double down on that. Be consistent. So don't be putting out different messages everywhere. Make it really clear that I'm this person and this is what I do. And of course, don't be afraid to get out there. Your brand's nothing if it's not out in the public. If you keep it in a little box, it's just a visual asset that has no association for other people. And before we jump into Maddie, I'm going to kick things off. For anyone who hasn't used XD before, we're going to do a quick little introduction to XD. So you can see Maddie and I have built our slide deck here in XD. And I personally love building presentations in XD, mostly because I can play them right from in here, and I'm usually doing demos in XD. But there's a lot of handy functions that allow us to build really nice presentations, and there's a new plugin coming that'll make it even easier. But to start, I'm going to flip over to a file I have open. And this is a file that I've slowly been working on some of my own personal branding in. And you'll see I've pulled forward a little bit of a snippet from the file you see in your starter kit and what Maddie's going to walk through. And this is a simple little brand palette that Maddie's put together and I shamelessly stole. And I just want to show you how easy some of these features are. So in XD, it's a pretty lightweight experience design tool. Everything's contextual and kind of given to you when you need it. So here we have 3 modes: design, prototype, and share. For the most part, we'll be looking at design today, but prototype is as simple as toggling over to a tab, and then you can bring things to life. So lots of resources available on prototyping. On the left, we have basic shape tools. So I can just click on this, drag out a rectangle, manipulate the border radius, basic things like that. And you'll notice as I select this, the property inspector on the right is going to change. It's contextual to what I'm doing. And so I have all my appearance controls, transform controls, things like that. And as I select different elements, whether that's text or shapes, this is going to change. So I don't have to go digging through menus to find what I need. So that's our left panel. In the bottom left, we have 3 panels. We have our libraries panel, a layers panel. This is where we can see all the layers and artboards in our file. And then plugins. So this is basically extensions that can help supercharge our workflow in XD. We're not really going to talk about that tonight. We're going to focus on libraries and layers, but just pointing out that that's there. So for me, and one thing that's going to be really helpful as you go ahead and build out your brand as it evolves is creating some sort of base library. So if I open this up, you can see I have a number of different libraries, and these all contain various assets. For instance, I have a folder with a bunch of stock images that I can pull in at any time, and these are licensed from Adobe stock. And there's a giant free collection. That's pretty much all that I use. And then I have some other different product design libraries, some logo libraries, and then my document assets. And this is all of the local assets in my file here. And you can see I've added some colors. And in doing so, if I just delete some of these, I can easily add colors just by highlighting them and adding them in here. And I can name these whatever I want. So I don't know, bronze. I'm not great at naming colors. It's not in my brand. But here I can just add these colors, and this means that I can jump in at any point and easily apply them into my design. Now I should have added this one. So just like that, I can click and apply it. And what this allows me to do is if I say want to change a brand color, I can just come in here and edit it. And anywhere that color was being applied, it will update to the new color, which is super handy as your brand evolves over the years. So I'm going to undo that. And I'll flip over to another document. And this is just where I've started creating a library. So I wanted to show you what some of the things are that you can include. So of course, I've built in some logos, and this means that I can just grab a logo, drop it into my canvas and start working with it. And then anytime that logo changes, that will sync and update across my designs as well. I have a little signature I'll use. It's not the real signature because you don't want to get scammed, but it's a modified signature that just looks more visually appealing. So I have that in here as well. And then just like colors, I can start building out some other elements of my brand. So here I've added a couple character styles, and I can just hit on this plus and add them in as well, rename it and say header and subheader. And now whenever I'm using this library, I can click on this, update this library. And then if I'm working in a file that I need my branding for, let's say I'm back in this, and maybe I want to change my paragraph. Actually, I shouldn't because I didn't set a style for that. But if I come back to my libraries, I can add that new library in just by toggling it on here. And now I have access to all those styles I saved. So I could just come in here, name this my subheader, and just like that, I have it applied. And if I need, say, to replace an image, this is a little embarrassing having images on here, but it's all right. Let's say I pull in a new image, I can just quickly replace it using components. So everything's built into components. So that's a really handy feature using libraries in XD. Everything else is pretty contextual. All my tooling is here. I can easily access my layers. So if I am drilling into something, I can just access them here, click through, reorder elements, and everything like that. So that's a super brief intro. Again, if you want to learn more, you can check out the new Learn Hub. And that link is going to take you right to the Getting Started page. So that's a great spot to kick off your learning from. With that, I'm going to turn things back over to Maddie to give you a little insight into her personal brand, and then we're going to start into the hands-on workshop.
Awesome. All right, cool. So I'm going to start kind of like Matt did, just kind of walking you guys through how I think about personal brand. So like you mentioned, a lot of people just think about the visuals when it comes to a personal brand. So I did want to kind of start with that because I think it's also fun. Like I liked seeing Matt's personal brand, so I wanted to show you mine too. So I kind of used this same little layout. I gave myself some headline text, body copy text, in another sort of style here. And since I've been focusing a lot on YouTube content this year, I recently decided to actually give myself a proper banner. And so I really kind of tried to pull, even with the colors that I was choosing, like this emerald green shows up in a lot of these images, and same with these warm tones. And of course, I also pulled in the text style. So that's just to kind of show you how these things can start to actually look in real life when you design something out. And we're going to be designing something kind of similar to this in this session. So that should be fun. So today I want to talk briefly about 3 questions that helped me craft my brand outside of the visuals. So I just talked about those visuals. That's just something that kind of evolves. And for me, I like it to speak to my personality, like the warm toned colors. And I sort of always use this grainy sort of texture. Sometimes I go with this, you know, pencil outline type of thing. That's all kind of part of my brand. You see it especially in like the content creation side of my brand. But when it comes to other things outside of the visuals, just the way you show up in your work and the way you build a strong foundation for yourself as a designer, that really matters too. So 3 things that have sort of helped me do that. The first is the question, what's your concept? And my professor in design school said this, I swear, like every 10 seconds, what's your concept? And I didn't really know what that meant at first. I was like, what do you mean my concept? You know, I'm just like designing something cool. But it's really important that whenever you have a project that you're working on, that you do have a concept and that you have a why and like reasoning behind why you make creative decisions, and that turns into your brand. Your brand is not just just your work, it's the way that you work and think. So every project that you have should have some sort of, you know, why behind it. And it's important that you are able to show and explain your creative decisions, your processes, and that type of thing, because that becomes your brand. Your brand is how people work with you and not just the, you know, work that you put out there. When I first started freelancing, I was kind of all over the place. So this graphic will show you I was doing a little bit of branding, packaging, UI, UX, web, marketing, photography, print design, and just everything. And I was doing it for everyone too. Like a startup would reach out and be like, yeah, definitely I'll work with startups. Yeah, I'll work with yoga instructors. Yeah, I'll work with retail companies, corporate companies, tech companies. I just, you know, needed to make a living as a freelancer. And so I thought that the way to do that was to say yes to everything and to cast a wide net. And I think that it's really important to, at least as you go, start to niche down. And Matt was talking about this too. Now you can see, if you were to go on my website, that I'm really specific about who I say I'm working for. My sort of statement here is, I help wellness startups get off the ground and start making money through strategic UI, UX, and web design. And then on the side, I help fellow designers make a bigger impact and earn more as creative freelancers. So those are sort of 2 different things. But if we just focus on the client work, it's, you know, the what is strategic UI, UX, and web design. And the for who is wellness startups. So that's kind of my elevator pitch. And I think it's really important when you are honing in on your brand to come up with that elevator pitch. What you do, who you serve, and that way the people that you meet can put you into a box. And that's not to sort of stunt your creativity, but it is to make you more memorable, because no one's going to just remember, oh, Maddie is a designer. Like, lots of people are designers, but someone's more likely to remember that she does strategic web design for wellness companies. And then if they, come across a wellness company, or a friend of theirs is starting a wellness company, they're probably going to think of me for the web design, because wellness kind of goes hand in hand with how they think about me. And so that is all part of branding. All right, so we kind of touched on that. You can, if you write this statement, you should be able to underline, exactly what the who is and what the what is. And then another thing to add to that is just to make sure that your portfolio reflects that. So all of these projects that I have in my portfolio have to do with wellness. Some of them are UI UX, some of them are web. And so you want to make sure that what you are putting out into the world verbally, when you meet people and things like that, is reflected everywhere. And this is just a reminder for freelancers, but probably for everyone, you'll get more of the work that you show. So show more of the work you want. So show the work you want to get more of. Wow, I didn't realize I created the tongue twister. But basically, you should be showing the work that you want more of, because that's what people think that you do. And so figure out how to, maybe do some practice projects, do free work, whatever it takes to get the stuff that you really like doing in your portfolio. Okay, and the last question is, what have you been up to? So that is a question that you'll probably get asked by friends, colleagues, even in interviews. It's like, okay, so especially with this pandemic, what have you done in the past year? Maybe you took a year off, and maybe you were just, had a little bit of a rough time getting clients, or whatever it might be. Maybe you had one huge project you worked on for a year and a half, and that's all you really have to show. Then it might look up by your portfolio that you haven't been doing all that much. And so I really think that it's important to keep your portfolio updated. And instead of just adding new projects when you have new projects, then it's important to add some other things too. So this is just showing that every designer faces this conundrum of either they update their portfolio like every week, or they never update their portfolio. And I feel like sometimes I'm in both of those camps. So I don't know why this is skipping. Oh, geez. So basically that was kind of the end, but I just had a tip in that scenario where if you don't have any new projects to upload, but you want to show that you're an active creative, an active designer, then things you can add to your portfolio are blog posts. You can do work in progress type of things. You can even do sort of like, what events have you been attending? Maybe what like fun on the side projects have you been doing, even if it's just one or two images. Those types of things really help keep your portfolio like alive and breathing, so that if someone looked at it, 1 month and then 6 months later looked at it again, it would seem like you're still an active creative in the field. So those are my tips there about personal branding. We have some questions about our branding. Matt, do you want to answer these now, or should we come back to it in the Q&A section? What do you think?
Yeah, we could take a quick break. Not break, but the first question is, what if you don't feel like you have enough work in your portfolio that's related to the niche you picked for yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I semi-touched on it, but something that I'm a big proponent of is practice projects, or I shouldn't even say practice, because if you are a seasoned designer and you just don't have the type of work coming in the door that you want, it's not a practice project, it's just a personal project. So you can give yourself those types of projects. You can actively reach out to clients in that space, offer to do stuff for free. Maybe you have a friend starting a company that sort of falls into that category for you. Whatever it might be, if it's for yourself or for someone else, just spend the time and work on it. and put it in your portfolio. That's what I'm spending the entirety of my residency doing, is these sort of personal projects that are going to get me the clients that I want. Matt, what else do you think on that?
Yeah, so I shared a link in there to the Daily Creative Challenge, which is kind of like an ongoing set of challenges that you can use. And they're fairly basic on their own. So one day you might be creating a landing page, one day you might be creating a login page. You can use those to kind of use as a base to create these personal projects. And so I'll link this into Allison's question on examples of personal projects. So if there's something like some problem that you're having yourself that you want to solve and create a solution for, you can go through that full like design process based off that problem. It doesn't have to be something that a company has given you. You can create it and say like, oh, I really want, like, I'm having trouble finding good hiking trails. That's just what's in the top of my head. But you can take that problem and kind of expand on it, and maybe even pair that theme with a creative challenge and say, okay, I'm thinking about hiking trails. We're doing a landing page. So I'm going to theme this based off this, and then pair it with my design process. And so slowly you can build up all these different mini projects that stick to the theme that you're trying to do, if it's like an outdoors brand, and build on that. So that's one way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. One question here, are you redesigning apps or flows through apps or websites, conceptual redesigns? So what I personally am spending time doing is, I guess you could call it conceptual, but I'm doing a lot of research as part of it, so that the goal honestly is for me to do this project. I have maybe this app idea, and then I put it out there and maybe someone will see it and, you know, hire me to do something similar. And that, just to sort of give you an inspirational story, that happened. So I was doing this app project where I basically designed an app that pairs with an essential oil diffuser. So this kind of comes back to the wellness thing. This is what I want more work in. And I shared this project that I came up with on Behance, and someone who was trying to patent a smart diffuser came to me and said, oh my gosh, we need you to design our app. This is like exactly the product that we are coming out with. And this was before I even knew that a smart diffuser was like a real product that people were doing. So basically, if you do something that you're really interested in, and you know, you kind of get it out there and share it around, then someone might pick it up and hire you to do something similar. So that's kind of how my approach to it. For practice, you could also definitely redesign apps, but a lot of times, for me at least, when I'm sort of looking through those, they can be just really UI heavy and not so much UX heavy, because sometimes it's hard to really reimagine the experience if you're doing something that's not from scratch. Let's see what else here.
So I think that's most of the questions.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so let's dive into the demo, and then we can make some time at the end or during the demo if anything comes up contextually.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thanks for those questions. So we're gonna dive in here, and what we have, which you will not have, I don't think, maybe you do have this, but if you don't have all of the assets here, that's okay. This is just an example. So we have this persona here. So this is Katie. Katie's very cute. I love that little toy icon. And we've sort of just given Katie this persona. She's a freelance web designer who works with outdoor and adventure brands. Katie works from her van, traveling and living that working nomad life. So she likes biking, photography, and the beach. So we just gave her a little bit of personality. And we also had Julia Masowska, who was working on us with this project, come up with some logos for Katie. So we've got these here, and as Matt was talking about before, we added them to our components panel so that we can just drag them out and use them anywhere in this file, which is awesome. We also set up our text styles and colors, just like we were talking about before. So that's sort of this persona. And somebody said Katie and I go way back. That's really funny. Okay, so the other things that you will see here are these templates, and these are things that you can use for social assets. So we have a Twitter header, Facebook cover, Instagram profile, Behance profile, which is what we're going to use today, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok stories, posts, YouTube channel banner, which is what I showed earlier in my presentation, and a YouTube thumbnail. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to take this Behance banner and we're going to create something to stick in here into Katie's profile. And so what we want to do is kind of keep on brand for her. So we're going to drag that over here and try to figure out exactly what this should look like for Katie, being that she's working with adventure brands, outdoorsy types of things, and she's focusing on web design. So I think what we're going to do first is just sort of give this a background color so that we can kind of see what we're doing here. So we'll go with this light blue. And then I want to add sort of like a background text situation. I want to give Katie a little bit of like a title, like since she's a web designer, I sort of want to have something like web design, but I want it to keep repeating so it almost looks like a background texture. Okay, so we have this, but I definitely want to make it bigger so that it sort of spans across here. And the other thing is, whenever I have my text really separated like that, like tracked out, I like to always put it in all caps because it's so much more readable like that. Okay, cool. So we have this so far, and I think it's looking good. It's looking on brand, but it's definitely a little boring. Like we can do a lot more fun stuff with this. So I think what I'm going to do now is add in an image that I downloaded, I believe from Adobe Stock, and we're going to use this to create a texture. And so what I want to do first is create a mask. So all I did was drag this in from my desktop. I had already downloaded this, and I want to create a mask to have this as a texture in the background here. So in order to do that, I'm just going to hit the R key to create a rectangle, and I'm going to span that rectangle the whole height and width of this artboard. And then we're going to bring our image over here, and I'm going to make sure that I have the mask and the image selected, and I'm going to hit Command Shift M in order to mask that. And so it's looking okay, but as you can see, the image is not really in the right spot. So I'm just going to double click in there and we can move it around however we want. And so as you can see, this is looking really crazy right now, but I want to show you a cool way to use images as textures and have them kind of recede into the background. So we're going to do that using blend modes. But first, I want to move this to the back behind the text. And in order to do that, we can just go into our layers panel and we can do that. Or the other option is to hit Command left bracket. That's sort of just the shortcut way to do that. Okay, so now as it is, again, it's kind of loud, right? And it's very clearly like a close-up of a plant, but I just want to use it as a texture. So I'm going to play around with blend modes. And in order to do that, you're just going to go to the appearance panel, and the default is either pass through or normal. And what we're going to do is just play around with what these look like. I like to just experiment and look at a bunch of these. And sometimes depending on the color that's behind it and the image, they look completely different. So it's kind of interesting. I think for this one, I want to go with soft light. And I also want to make it recede even more into the background. And so we're going to give it like a 40% opacity. And so as you can see here, now that we've done that, we've used that blend mode, we can see that like all three of these nice brand colors are showing up in there, and it just looks more like a background texture than a real, you know, actual obvious image. So I think that's kind of a fun thing to do, especially for these banner type of designs. And since she is sort of a traveling web designer, she considers herself a working nomad. She works out of her van. I thought it would be cool to include a laptop in here. And so, you know, the laptop sort of just screams like, oh, you're traveling, you're working from wherever. It's all very exciting. And so I think I want to just bring in that laptop. Ooh, where did it go? And I just downloaded this from Adobe Stock as well. And we're just going to try to position it in the way that looks best. And since we have, if we kind of look at our template down here, we can see that this section kind of peaks above the banner. And that means that we don't want to have any really crucial information or imagery over on this side because it will get covered up. And so then you can sort of just move it wherever you want. And I think what I want is for it to look like this is sort of going into the laptop screen. I think that would be kind of cool. So I am going to bring this up in the layers panel to the very top, which again, you can do Command right bracket in order to do that. And I want to just experiment with the size of this and how we can make it sort of look like it's going through that screen. I think that's cool because we have sort of the W and that end of the screen lining up. So that looks pretty sweet. Okay, awesome. I think that this is looking good as at least one version. So I think it would be cool if we exported it and then dropped it in to see what it looks like in the right context. So I am just going to take this and I'm going to do Command E to export, and I'm just going to throw it into my downloads for now. And since I have this rectangle over here, it's going to act as a mask, and I can just drag from my downloads straight into here. And in order to make it sort of go into this mask, you're just going to drag over top of it. It's going to turn blue. Then you can let go and pop it right in. And there you go. That looks pretty cool, at least for one sort of design. The other cool thing that we can do is, since it's got a blend mode on it, if we change the background color of the artboard itself, it's going to like completely change what it looks like. So we're sort of seeing that in action here. And so let's try to do kind of like a crazy orange one. And we can also change this blend mode and sort of see how that changes. I love this trick because it can just look so different and you can play around with so many different things. So we could honestly come up with like 20 different sort of ways to do this, and all of them would look really different. Awesome. Okay, and then the other thing that I wanted to show was, what if you want to take this asset and actually use it in other scenarios? So look at how many other sort of templates we have over here. And so maybe we do Twitter, for example. So I'm just going to copy and paste. Well, actually, I want to use responsive resize. So I'm just going to take note of exactly how big this is. It is 1500 by 500. And we're going to now just change this completely. So we'll click on this artboard, turn on responsive resize, and this is going to allow us to sort of just manipulate this and see what it looks like in this other format. And we may have to make a few tweaks, but it saves so much time to be able to do this. So, okay, that's what it looks like with the automatic responsive resize. And I think I'm just gonna make a couple tweaks here so that it looks exactly how we want it. I feel like this could be cool for this version. just center that. And that looks cool. The other thing you could do is sort of make this smaller and make it repeat. That might be interesting. You can do so much with this, and then maybe make it recede into the background. Let's see. You could just really kind of go crazy with this type of thing. And with your own branding, of course, it's going to look completely different. Katie has a very eclectic style. So I like to go crazy with Katie's branding, but you can keep it so simple, just sort of using these tools and these ideas. All right, awesome. I think that's pretty much all that I have to show for this Behance banner. There are definitely, yeah, thank you. There's definitely a lot more you guys can do with all of these different templates. So feel free to pick whichever ones you want to use and yeah, apply your own branding to them.
Awesome. And while you're still sharing, I'm just going to point out, if any of you have been watching the screen, you may have seen a little red box start showing up in various places. And that's me messing around in the file at the same time. You can see my avatar up at the top of the document. And this is XD's live co-editing feature. So it means that you can invite other people into the document and work on something together. Personal branding might not be the thing you're working collaboratively with somebody else on, but we at least wanted to show off this feature that I can jump in here, and while Maddie's maybe working on another artboard, I can be coming in and making some adjustments. Now, before I share my screen, I want to take this design that Maddie's just created, and I'm going to quickly show how we can use another XD feature called components to really make it easy to not only carry this design across our different templates, but keep it in sync really easily. So what I'm going to do is I want to make use of these elements. So I'm just going to copy all of this, and you can't see my layers panel yet or my actions, but I'm going to just quickly make this a component, and you're going to see it change in Maddie's screen there. So Maddie, if you go to the right there, yeah, you can see the latest component I just created. I now have this clone copy of what I created. Now the artboard that we created it on had some color. So that is creating a different look, but we can easily build that into the component too. So I'm going to switch over to my screen now and show you. I think somebody's not muted. It might be good now. Okay. So this is what I've created. You can see I've made this component. And if I open up my component panel, this is that element here. So just like Maddie duplicated it, I can duplicate it out as well. Now, if I want to bring this blue color in so that it carries with me, I'm just going to open up my layers panel. And you can see here I have that mask group. This is all within my component. And I'm just going to use that rectangle tool again. Draw out a little background. And then just copy out that color that I was using and apply it here. And now that color, as I knock this to the back, so I can relayer things by using the layers panel. I like shortcuts. So you can use Shift Command and square brackets to knock a layer down to the bottom. So now that that's in this main component, so the main component is kind of the parent. It gives all the instructions to the children. So when I pull that out now, let's call this my banner. So it's nice and clear. Now it will have that color as well. So there's a few things we can do here with this. Because this is a main component and this is a copy of it, this copy is going to receive all the changes the main one makes or has. So if I go into that shape again and change this color of the bottom rectangle, maybe I'll change it to pink. You can see that copy is also going to change with it. So this means that we can easily keep our versions in sync. So if I have a Twitter banner and a Behance banner, I can, if I change the color, it'll change everywhere and I don't have to go one by one. So with that in place, let's take this and apply it to Facebook. Now, this one's a little bit smaller. So again, we could use responsive resize here and resize it down. We can also click into the component. And what I'm doing is I'm basically overriding the size properties and position properties of this design. Now, that works. I can also select these text elements. Wow, we got some layers here. I can move these around, adjust them. And just because I'm moving these, it isn't going to negate the changes that it was getting before. I'm going to bring these up as well. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Ruining Maddie's design here. Anyway, so now I have the Facebook cover. If I once again come back and change that background rectangle, it's going to change here. So now my Facebook cover is in sync. But even though I've repositioned the elements and changed it to fit. So I can keep doing that. I can even bring it down and say I want to create an Instagram story. I can easily resize that rectangle, start drawing things out, and just reposition all the elements until I get the look that I'm going for. Now, I'm not quick at this, so I'm not going to do this to all of them because we'll be here all night. But you can see how easily a clumsy person like me can do this. So maybe for Instagram, we just pull it down like this, and we want that one story. This is where naming layers can be helpful.
Ooh, interesting. Yes,
We
absolutely.
can pull this forward or do something. Now I'm just getting crazy with layer ordering. Here we go. So I'll move that over and we get that nice look. And now when I back that off, everything again is consistent. Now, if I wanted to change something, I don't need to keep everything in sync. Maybe in this one, I want to swap out this image that I'm using in the mask. In this case, I can come back to my libraries, like I mentioned before, open up a stock image, and maybe I'm adjusting it. I have no idea what these images are. So we'll just pull one in. And now we have a musician in the background. This doesn't match, but just roll with it. So now I've changed the image, but because I haven't changed that background rectangle, I can still keep my colors updated and all the other properties in sync. So I can make these custom overrides, but still keep everything else in sync. So components are a really handy way to carry this brand across. And because they're reusable elements, they're going to show up in that brand library, which I don't have. So yeah. So that's where components are helpful. You can build them into that library that you're creating for your personal brand. And then it's as simple as dragging them out of the library and placing them into your design.
Awesome.
Back in essence. There we go. Yeah, so like that.
Great.
Cool. And
we really went rogue on those.
On the designs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
I do that.
Same.
I'm not great at designing on the fly, but
it isn't easy. So there are a couple good questions that are coming in the chat, and I think we are going to switch over to some more Q&A. So feel free to keep the questions coming. Do you guys have a favorite site to look for commercial use graphics? So I use Adobe Stock a lot. The other thing that I will use a lot is Unsplash. What else? Yeah, there are a lot of good plugins for things like that, like for icons and that kind of thing. Like I know the one that a lot of people use is icons for the number 4 design. I don't know if that's what you mean by graphics, but for icons, that's what I use. Yeah, what else, Matt?
Yeah, I use, oh, better not show this. That's a private access. Streamline icons. There you go. I don't want to give away any Streamline secrets.
Right.
So Streamline icons I like using. I put them into an app called Icon Jar, and then I can just drag them out
Cool.
into my XD design. Yeah, Unsplash and the free collection for Adobe Stock are
Mhm.
really my go-tos for images. Um, yeah, if I don't take them myself, I try and take some myself as well, and just load those into a library from Lightroom.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and then graphics, yeah, there's Undraw and the Humans plugin.
Mhm.
Those are great for illustration assets. I think Streamline is working on some as well. Yeah,
Cool.
Flat Icon is another great one. Font Awesome. There's so many resources now.
Mhm. Yeah. When
Yeah,
Katie
and
finalizes, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to follow that up with copyright. And so, yes, you do
Mm.
need to be careful when and where you're using it. So, for instance, that's why the starter kit isn't including Adobe stock images. Even though these are free, you do need to license them from your account because they are created. They're just a paid for license. So, when you do click into them, as soon as you license them, you can license it for free and then it'll show up in your library. So
Yeah.
yeah, do check out. Usually on sites like Unsplash, you can access um, different copyright rules on the image itself.
Mhm.
Can't remember where to find it.
I think it's when you download it, it'll tell you.
Correct. So this one really is just about attribution. They're all free as long as you give a shout out to the creator.
Mhm.
So just look for that copyright information on the site that you're downloading from.
Yeah, good question. And then when Katie finalizes this board, how is it used? Does it print? Is it for presentation only? So what I would use this for is to then export these and upload them onto whatever, sites those are. So for that Behance one, I would export that out, go right into Behance and upload it. And it's super easy to do that. And I usually will have a folder with like all of those assets. And I sort of make sure that those are all staying consistent across all my platforms, and having a template like this, like where they're all in one space in this XD file, is even better than having, like a folder with the exported assets, because you can always be changing things. So they export as images, SVG. You can export as JPEG, PNG, and I think you can export as SVG as well. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yep.
you just
PDF.
go into the file menu and export. And
Mm-hmm.
having a card like this isn't necessarily to export anything. It's really for your
Totally.
reference. You can just kind of keep quick access things in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so doing presentations, Maddie and I often have to send our headshots out. So having that really easily accessible with
Exactly.
a bio is something that I would include in here as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I saved a couple from earlier, so we didn't miss them. But
Cool.
how hard was it to find a junior UI UX job?
Mm.
Often there's only senior positions.
Yeah. So for me personally, that was back in 2017, and I am hearing a similar thing from a lot of people. So I don't know. I guess it was in a less competitive time back then. It was labeled as a digital designer position. And when I started, it was UI UX, it was app design. And so I think at some companies at that point were still figuring out like what UX was, what it wasn't. And so it was kind of a good time to get in where I could just be learning. I was a junior designer in there. So I was just doing a lot of different things, and it was widely UI UX. So unfortunately I don't have advice for getting a job like that right this second. But I think it's just important, sort of like we were saying, that's all the more reason to build your personal brand and to really continue to work on it and practice. Maybe Matt has some more tactile tips, but I think I just got lucky with my timing.
Yeah, I wish I had a story that I could tell everybody and you could all go get junior jobs. Mine was very
Yeah.
much timing as well. And I think I started by kind of co-founding a startup. It failed miserably, but I co-founded a startup and kind of created that first opportunity for myself to go from I don't know what I'm doing to I have some idea what I'm doing. And so sometimes you need to create that space. It's
Mm,
less about finding the first opportunity versus creating it. And that is hard to do, but sometimes that might need to be the step. I
I
also
love
lucked out
that.
with timing as it was like on the cusp of this new wave of UX design as a career. But you can take that idea and think about how can I create these opportunities for myself. Really, you can't sit back and just wait for opportunities to come. You have to create them and go and seek them. And it's extremely hard to do. But
Hmm.
in the end, you should be rewarded for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
congrats to Ian, because they just said I've been accepted to design an app for a
ooh,
company. So I'm very excited today. That's really
that's
exciting.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
your early experiences can be super nerve wracking.
Yep.
Um, but just focus on what you learn. Like, don't be afraid to make mistakes, but make sure you learn from them and don't repeat them. I've had some epic failure product launches that really put me where I am today for a good thing. Um, as you grow your brand, what tools and platforms would you recommend to manage your social media presence, website, and portfolio?
Mm. For me, I used to use Later and I used to use Planoly, and neither of them really stuck with me. So I don't have any really experiences to share there. I just manage it. This is probably weird, but I manage it in XD. Like I kind of have this whole XD file where I have all of my Instagram posts like laid out in a grid, how they're going to look. And that's like where I go to design my posts. So that's where I also go to like drop them in and see kind of like what colors, what types of posts I need next, and that kind of thing. Yeah, but I don't do anything
Yeah,
fancy.
and definitely using a file like this with the artboard templates, there are several social media ones. We've added a few extras into this file for you. But this is definitely a great way to kind of plan things out. On the sharing side, I've always been a fan of Buffer for scheduling tweets, and I think they do Instagram posts now. So you can kind of preload and schedule out how you're going to share that content if
Cool.
that's kind of the tool you're looking for. But there's several
Awesome.
others like TweetDeck does that as well, and Hootsuite, I think. So
Hmm.
there's a few different options out there.
Awesome.
Um, what are some of the skills the industry will deviate towards in the future? Ooh,
Oh,
good
wow. Loaded
question.
question.
So there's definitely a lot, like it's a growing field. And I think titles aside, it's a pretty vast field depending on where you're focusing. You might have different skill sets compared to others. Some fields have kind of just shifted to adopt product design or UX design. It's pretty blurry lines. I think in terms of the future, the big things are going to be there's going to be a lot on like voice and audio design, augmented reality, virtual reality. My second to last company was in autonomous vehicles, and that was in very confined environments in manufacturing. But as we get to more self-driving vehicles, there's going to be a whole lot of user experience challenges with that, especially from like mapping and dealing with the challenges that come with that. So being able to adapt is huge, and go beyond just the screen. Um, and there's lots of features in XD that we won't have time to talk about today that can help you do that. So feel free to tweet at me and ask for resources on that. But yeah, definitely augmented reality, VR, and voice assistance.
Yep. I definitely echo that. Um, mhm.
Yeah, and Carrie, I can try and put together a list of what I've shared. You can also, you should be able to save the chat. If you click the three dots next to file in the chat window, there's a save chat option if you want to save
Perfect.
all the links.
Perfect. Someone also asks, related to social media, is it a good idea to have a separate account for your work and personal, for example? And I think that depends. So for me personally, I've never really gotten clients, design clients from Instagram. And maybe I'm alone in that, but I think that a lot of people will sort of agree and say that mostly their clients come from word of mouth, from Behance, from places that are, that places that people go to find designers, right? And so if, you're just making this account just sort of to find clients, I would say that, you don't really need to make a separate account. If you're just trying to share, maybe you're trying to like educate and you're trying to join the community, that's awesome. You could make a separate account or you could just include design content in your own. I find that for my sort of content business, I guess I could say, like educational side, that's where Instagram is really awesome because people go, like designers go there to learn, and creatives go there to learn. But I don't know that a ton of hiring managers or people who are, looking for a dedicated designer go looking for those people on Instagram, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's I'm going through that challenge myself right now. Is I've been
Mm-hmm.
using my own like LinkedIn and Twitter primarily for work stuff and getting my branding out.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram's always just kind of been photos for me, usually of travels. And so that might convert into something else completely outdoorsy and not design related. But I also have another property that will likely become my content feed, but isn't my name. So working through that, sometimes you just need
Yeah.
to adjust, and it'll happen.
Yeah,
But
definitely. They're
just
saying
experiment.
thanks. Yeah, they're saying thanks. Sometimes I wear my personal Twitter and Instagram or two on professional at this point to convert into a more design oriented account. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you know better than anyone what you're comfortable like having potential employers and potential collaborators see. So yeah, I think that's super valid to create something separate if that's what you want to do. Cool. See if there are any more questions that we missed.
Yeah, and Ian had a question about a group where you can share projects and get feedback. I'm not sure if I'm assuming there might be one for Calgary UX as well. I'm not sure if you were asking about that, but I shared in a Discord invite to the Adobe XD community Discord.
Yep.
I'm in there. Are you in there,
Me
Maddie?
too. Mm-hmm.
Maddie is too.
We're in there.
So we're probably both mentors or something. So you should be able to find us if I remember to open Discord in the morning.
Same
Then
boat.
I'll be there. But yeah, there's tons of help. A lot of our evangelist Howard Pinsky's in there. A few other mentors from YouTube are also in there. So it's a great way to stay in touch with the daily creative challenges and get feedback. And the Calgary UX Slack is added in there as well. I'd have to
Awesome.
join that and hang out. What's one more Slack, right? So yeah,
Right.
those are a couple great communities to join and stay in touch with.
Yeah, awesome.
Fiverr and Upwork. Yeah, so we have another one. Are Fiverr and Upwork good platforms for UI UX designers? And I'm assuming this is maybe in terms of getting work. I would
I'm
assume.
assuming.
And like,
I'm
any
assuming.
thoughts on that, Maddie?
Yeah, I don't have any experience with that, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know. I think I've heard mixed reviews. I think that if you're really diligent on there and you that's sort of where you start building your network, that can be fantastic. I also think that sometimes people are selling their services for really, really low prices on there, and it can sometimes skew the market, which can be really frustrating. And that's personally just why I've never used it. However, I do know some people who started on there and, kind of stand by it as a good place to start. So yeah, you can feel free to try it out. and get back to us.
Yeah. I mean, that could be a really great way to build and create those opportunities in a particular niche too, because you
Good
have
point.
full control over accepting and declining. So you could just write a really specific bio and see who picks it up. And that could be the foundation for something great. So
Yeah, that's such a
worth a
good
shot.
idea. Yeah, cool.
Okay. So it looks like we're just about wrapped on questions. Feel free, I'll drop our, if I can pull up the document, I'll drop our social in there. Maddie, do you want to drop your Twitter in? I don't think I have it on this
Yep.
paste. But feel free to reach out to us there. You can also send me an email if I type it correctly. I think that's right. To that address if you have questions. Definitely save the chat if you can. If not, I can try and follow up with a digest of links and helpful resources. Yeah. And thanks for listening and following along. Stay tuned for the
Yeah.
recording so that you can play it back if you got stuck anywhere.
Yeah,
But for
definitely.
now,
Thanks for
I'll hand it
having
back.
us.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Matt, Maddie. It's been amazing to see you collaborating and also proposing ideas on how you can not only create your own identity, but also being able to be outside and provide value to everybody else. We really appreciate you are coming in and also being the experts in this field. It's really enlightening for junior designers and for myself to see how everybody is trying to understand the different platforms and ideas that are really involving our identities. What can I say? We can only be thankful for everything that you have done. I really think that we are looking for the next opportunity to bring you in. And in the meantime, I would like to just share with you a couple of announcements. So let me share my screen, and also at the same time, I'm going to stop the recording